Okay, go ahead and get started. So welcome to the October 9th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. I'm Don McWilliams. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Due to our hybrid format of today's meeting, I'd like to start by providing some guidelines. We have participants in the room as well as those attending virtually. For all meeting attendees, please speak clearly, pause frequently, state your name each time before speaking. For those in the room, please raise your name card to indicate you have an interest to speak. For those virtual, microphones when you're not speaking. And then just raise your hand virtually and we'll call on you there. If you're having technical issues, try joining the meeting from a different device, or you can use the call-in information invite as well. As we go through the topics tonight, we'll summarize as needed around the recommendation of each topic. Stacy, do we have any public comments tonight?
No.
Can I give one public comment?
Yes. Do you want me to do roll call first?
Yeah.
Okay. Tom Anderson,
Here.
Nancy Davidson has an excused absence. Jamie Finch,
Here.
Rajka Fandi. Here. Kiran Khan.
Here.
Nina June. Here. Don McWilliams.
Here.
Dixie Bear.
Here.
Alex Lee Tigner.
Here.
Ann Newcomb has an excused absence. Keith Gonzalez.
Here.
John Smith.
Here.
And John sitting in as a regular member tonight. And we.
All right, John.
Okay, speaking as a public comment, I just wanted to let people know that I will be hosting a litter cleanup program on Saturday at 9 o'clock. We meet at the post office on Northwest Gilman. We'll meet there. We've done this now every month for the last 3 years. So this will be our 36th event. I think we might have missed one for weather. But the way it works is you show up, maybe bring some gloves and a trash bag or two. And then we'll meet there, talk for a bit, and then split up and move around town and pick up litter. This will be probably a good week for litter because we had salmon days last week and there's probably a little bit here and there. So again, this is just not affiliated with the city of Issaquah. It's more of a grassroots thing that I've been doing for a while. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
John, I just had one question. So is it every Saturday you do it or
The first Saturday of every month.
one Saturday?
This is actually the second Saturday. We moved it a week because of Saturdays.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay, next up, I have approval of minutes. Was there any comments? We have two sets of minutes from previously, so our last meeting here, and then the special meeting for those that attended over at
Hickory Barn.
Hearing none, I'll take them as is. All right, Doug, you're up. Doug's going to talk to us about the natural environment checklist annual update.
It's loading right now. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Doug Yormick. I'm environmental planner with Community Planning and Developments. And I'm here to discuss critical areas tracking and monitoring. So the purpose is to provide the environmental board with an annual review of all projects that went through our community meeting, formerly pre-app community meeting, that are level 2 permits, or level 2 and above permits that have critical areas on site, and that is required by code. The agenda for this meeting, we kind of just go over just a quick overview of the checklist, provide an update on Title 18 and what we did with the community meeting code, and then get into how the spreadsheet is organized for tracking and monitoring of these projects over time. So We are still utilizing the natural environment checklist that the environmental board worked with Christian Geitz, former planning manager. So as planning staff, when we hold these meetings, we fill out all of the information that's on this form and then upload it to the project file. And then we can take that information and start plugging it into the permit tracking software spreadsheet. This year, we did some housekeeping amendments to Title 18, and one of them was we changed the pre-app community meeting to just a community meeting, and now it can be submitted pre or post permit submittal. If it's provided before, we'll hold the meeting. If they submit a permit and we recognize that this meeting is needed, staff will just go ahead and schedule that meeting within 60 days of the permit submittal, and we'll hold the meeting at that point. We didn't change any of the requirements for the levels of review. So for all level 2 and above land use permits that have critical areas on site, these meetings are still required.
Or can I ask you what level, can you explain level 2?
Yeah, so there are for land use permits, there are different levels of review, which just who's the decision maker. For level 2, that's administrative with public notice. So staff is the decision maker, but we'll provide public notice, whether that's notice of application, posting a sign on the property, and then we take public comments. Level 1 is also staff, but there is no real public involvement, and those tend to be more on like building permits. And then as you get higher levels, levels 3 and 4 are quasi judicial, whether it's hearing examiners, the final decision maker, or development commission. And then level 5 is city council as a decision maker. Yeah. For tracking and monitoring, I did update this spreadsheet from the last time that you saw it when Christian presented it last year. I felt that I could capture a project throughout its entire phase, going from the preliminary information that we get at one of these meetings or at initial permit submittal through construction permit, and then ultimately to the tracking portion, which is once the project has been completed and the mitigation measures have been installed, there's a period of time where we have to monitor that. So I think having a tab in kind of creating that, and I'm probably going to work on that a little bit more to capture more of the information that we get from these monitoring reports, and then also probably provide links of some kind so then you can review these monitoring reports as they come in as well. So that's kind of how it's separated now, where we have the preliminary information, approved projects, and that's once it goes through land use approval. It still might be in the construction permit phase, but at least at that point, the materials have been reviewed, mitigation plans have been reviewed, and critical area reports have been peer reviewed. And I kind of just went over this little bit. So early stage in the project, this is where we'll get input from community members as well, since the community is invited to attend these meetings. And a lot of the information is subject to change based on, peer review. Once we start analyzing the code, does the building have to shrink? Does access have to change to a different location, which may change the amount of impacts to the critical areas? So this will change over time, or has the potential to change over time. Once we go through land use approval and all of those documents have been reviewed, it's mostly set in stone at that point. There isn't going to be a whole lot of change from that point forward. So we're comfortable with saying that that's final. We've identified the mitigation measures. We know what the mitigation plans are and the performance standards that will be reviewed. And then we can use this as a comparison between the preliminary information that we get and then the approved once all of the documents have been reviewed. And then in that spreadsheet, I tried to capture that So you'll see what the number is for, say, impervious surface or floor area ratio, and then I'll show the difference between the preliminary and the approved in parentheses. And then the final, this is where we're going to add data to track the project through its maintenance and monitoring period. So critical areas will require a minimum of 5 years of maintenance and monitoring. That's done by the developer after the project has been complete. They provide us with reports yearly. A colleague of mine and I go out to the site to verify the findings of the report and see if it's actually meeting performance standards, and then come up with strategies if it's not meeting performance standards. And that's something that I would like to eventually capture in this final tab. So that next time I present this to you, you can see like some of these sites, you know, at year 3, something happened, something changed on the ground. We had significant die-off, or maybe an impact that we didn't recognize occurred. And now we have to kind of go back and figure it out, fix it, and then get the project back again. So it's really our hope with this is that we can really start tracking all of these sites over time throughout the maintenance and monitoring period. So that goes to now the review. So we had a total of 5 projects that went through the community meeting that had critical areas on site. We have another one planned soon. I believe that meeting will be next week. So that I'll include that in next year's update. 2 of the projects that we had this year were reasonable use exceptions. So those are a little bit different because in those, there is no reasonable use left of the property. So there are going to be, in some cases, significant impacts to the critical areas. One of them is going to be a wetland fill for a single family home, not the entire wetland, but a good portion of the wetlands. And another project that went through this was constructing a home in a steep slope critical area.
How do you determine what becomes reasonable use?
That's there's a list of criteria that's in the code that the applicant provides responses to. Ultimately, it's a hearing examiner decision, so it's quasi judicial. And so what we did with, I'll take the one that actually went all the way through, and we had the hearing a couple of months ago. We analyzed the square footage of all of the homes in the neighborhood. Most of the homes were constructed before we had critical area regulations. So they didn't have to go through something similar, but their land topography is almost exactly the same. So what was the size of the home constructed there, amount of footprint, amount of impervious surface, and we kind of landed at the median. So the applicant revised their plans to show that their impact kind of fell in the middle of what was constructed in the immediate surroundings. I think they looked at 20 something homes for that. So that's how we did it in that project. And we'll probably do something similar in the other reasonable use exception. That's a wetland fill. Look at the surrounding area, what's the size of the home, and kind of find a middle ground where you're minimizing, but still allowing for a single family home.
So basically, so I had a question associated with what Don asked. So is the national environmental checklist needed only for the critical areas development, or is it needed for all construction or redevelopment projects?
We use it for development projects that have critical areas adjacent. So if there's critical areas within 300 feet of that project site, that checklist would have to be filled out, whether or not there's going to be impacts to those critical areas.
Jonathan?
Were there any, so there's 3 projects that were approved in 2024. Were there any that were not approved or shut down?
No, not yet. So going into that, so 3 previously reported projects that were in the preliminary stages when Christian presented last year are now under construction. And that's Hillside Park improvements, Newport Way landslide permits, and the Hyla stormwater pump station. Those 3 have been approved by us, and Hyla is still awaiting outside jurisdiction approval before we'll issue the permits. But all of their impacts have been evaluated and mitigated. So once those permits have been issued, you'll see the next year it will be the mitigation plans that are coming in. So that would move to the final summary, so we can start tracking the progress of the mitigation sites.
Those 3 projects, city projects or private?
All 3 of those are city projects. And then that, any questions?
You can walk through the spreadsheet.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you want
No, I can. Does not show up very well on a laptop screen when you're sharing.
Zoom way in maybe in the top section to walk through the columns might be helpful.
Yeah. So I highlighted the 4 projects that went through one of these meetings for this year. The Northwest Perfection, Ellerwood.
They want to do the lower right hand, there's the Zoom bar.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Tom, I see your hand. We'll get to you here in just a second.
So the highlighted projects are this year's that were not presented. Last year's, I've kept the remaining, or all of the ones that were presented last year on here as well. And as they move through the whole permit process, they'll move to different tabs at that point. So we're still, a lot of these are still under review and haven't gone through land use approval yet. But as they do, they'll start to move. So we capture all the critical area information. So Bacara, flood hazard stream, and then staff will put in the information that is known at that time, what the impacts are to those specific critical areas. And again, most of this information is preliminary and it hasn't been reviewed. And then, so it will be subject to change, and you'll see how it changes when you get to the approved projects tab. And then we're also capturing still any of the other impacts to wildlife habitat, mitigation corridors, light and glare, scenic resources, and we'll also capture tree information, impervious surface, and then building information, size of the building, number of units, parking, height, etc.
Tom, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so refresh my memory on what happens post-project as the years tick by and the project is reviewed. I know we talked before about process improvement, and let's see, as we review this project after it's implemented, let's look at what worked well, what didn't work well, how can we improve the process from what we've learned from that. how would that be reflected in this? Is that like a totally different tracking mechanism, or would you add columns to the spreadsheet to talk about what worked well and what didn't work well? What could you remind me about on that?
Yeah, so I wasn't completely familiar with how Christian was going to do it. So my thought, and that's what I was starting to do with this spreadsheet, I would like it to be all in one place. So I would like this spreadsheet to move with the project throughout its permit history at land use, at construction, and then once everything is completed. So the information that I think you're asking about is what I want to put in the final summary tab. And that's what I'm going to start to capture. And I'm going to probably revise this final summary tab, keep all of the information that's currently there, but also add some more information so that we can better understand it, especially when we have discussions at this meeting, anything that we find throughout the year with these monitoring reports, where we can have that located in one place so we can all do it, see what's working, what's not, and, you know, try to create solutions to whether that's code related policy.
Okay, thank you.
Jamie?
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate you putting it together. And that, one of the things I think is a bit difficult is that you don't have a lot of the history, I think, of the feedback that we've given to Christian in the past on this document. I mean, I think going into this year, I think we all felt as a board, and I think we actually said this, and like we put together kind of a plan or a kind of overview of what we were hoping to accomplish. And one of them was revisiting just how and what is in this natural environment checklist, because I think in the years that we've had it going, it hasn't opened the door to really big insights yet. And some of what Christian was saying is that it's going to take time to build up the history, but I do question whether we're going to be able to get a whole lot out of the document as it currently is. And one thing that I think back to when we went through Title 18, and I can't remember the woman's name, but we had someone from the permit, someone that was actually the plan reviewer. I think we learned more during that meeting about how people are actually using the code, and like the ways that people are kind of getting around, and the impacts that we're seeing as a result. So I'm not sure that this is a tracking document, seems valuable, but I'm not sure that this on its own feels like we're going to be able to get a ton of insight out of and get like the policy insights that we might need to like figure out, oh, there's a problem with Title 18 on this in this area or whatever. So, and Stacey, feel free to interject.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe kind of the next step that needs to come out of the final summary sheet, is what the board, what Jamie was saying, the board really appreciated was that staff narrative.
Mhm.
And so having kind of the data in place, but then the associated memo that would come with that. And I think that could come through the next, at the next step of the presentation of this. But how are things being applied on the ground? What are the potential changes staff see being needed? And that's kind of the discussion that we have.
Yeah, the other topic area I was curious on was, I know urban forest management plan is not confirmed yet, but how is that going to be incorporated into this? And part of the reason I asked that is understand this checklist is just looking at where there's impacts to critical areas. Now, pretty much any development project is going to impact tree canopy. And so are we going to try to find a way to track how whatever both the Title 18 aspects of how we're managing tree canopy and whatever else comes out of urban forest management plan, is that going to be something that gets tracked here? And yeah, what is Dan's, are there columns on here that he's wanting to track, and does it need to be on different projects? I'm just curious on your thoughts on how we might, like, as that plan gets finalized, how we incorporate that.
Yeah, we are tracking with this spreadsheet, tree canopy, pre-developments. Are they requesting any reductions? I think that we could add more information on here regarding tree canopy. But it's only going to capture, at least for this, it's only going to capture what the projects that qualify to present. So it's going to be level 2 permits and above with critical areas. So that would have to be a conversation that we'd have to expand looking at specific projects when it comes to tree canopy. As staff, when we review building permits, any permit really, like we are looking at tree canopy for each individual sub area. They need to meet it. If they can't, additional trees have to be planted. So we're looking at that, but we aren't tracking any of that outside of once the permit is finalized, inspectors go out and make sure that the trees are in the ground. You know?
Yeah. No, and I think that neither for Stacy or Doug, like this seemed like a conversation that should be had with Dan around how this is gonna, whether this is in the national environment checklist or not. Like I actually think it might be a good place to track. Like maybe it's just what's the outcomes of like the canopy related parts of like plans that are level 1, but it seems like there's gonna need to be some sort of tracking for that, for us to be effective in evaluating what changes might need to be made to hit the goals that are going to be in that plan. So seems like it might be a different level. It's not obviously going to be all those columns for that type of plan, but just something to think about as that plan comes together. So and then the last thing that, and this is more of a Stacy question, like I do think one of the questions, like a natural environment checklist kind of implies, so like this is kind of building plans, and like a natural environment checklist might include other things. And so like, I don't know if like impacts to wild, like tracking things like what's happened to the bears with like, are there any other things that we should be thinking about? I know that's not the original intention of the checklist, but that was just something I was curious about, is are there other things that we feel like we should be tracking to like really feel like this is a checklist on how the natural environment has, like how is Issaquah done in relation to like, I think it's the thing that comes to mind, which I think is just a huge shame, is like the people don't know that like them leaving their trash cans out is resulting in euthanizations of wild animals. Are we tracking those types of things and other impacts to wildlife that we might be able to also use this as something as a resource for spreading awareness within the community.
Just so something, because I think right now the data for this is permit data, where if we're looking at other things, those might be items we could report through the strategic plan, through other data. It might get, we can talk more about, it might get a little bit complicated from mixing data.
And then I think the other thing that we could think about is the other topic we have this year is like our annual report. Are there elements outside of this checklist that we want to be making of it, like that's the report, part of the report is some things that aren't being tracked.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, questions?
So I just wanted to add something to what Jamie said, because when I looked at the spreadsheet also, I had the same question, the number of projects seem small. Like, so my question was, is it over just the last year, or what time period are these projects?
So several of these projects go back to 2021. The ones that are highlighted are just the ones that we had this year. We have more community meetings than what's shown on here. It's just not, there's no critical areas on site, so we're not tracking any of the mitigation measures because there isn't anything to review. So we could, because there's things on here that describe building size, and that's all information that we know.
So this is just me being skeptical. What I'm adding to what Jamie said was, and that is what I was thinking about it too, that, are there any elements which are not listed in the, criteria, which is allowing some of the projects to just pass through, And this is just a question. I don't know exactly how it's working out, but when I looked at this spreadsheet, I thought, just 5. So, So I'm just questioning that if we want to take again one more look at it to make sure everything is considered as far as critical areas or what needs to be monitored is being monitored.
And as you build your summary tab, one of the early asks was to have a dashboard, if you will, a visual dashboard that you could easily look at and kind of say, how are we doing to date?
Okay.
So whether that's by year or grand total, number of trees gained versus lost type of thing. Land mitigated, and you have the tabs up there.
Yeah.
That would be very helpful for us to look at a report, to just see it in a high level view,
Yeah.
rather than try to dig through a spreadsheet.
And just quick comment on what Don was saying. What might also be helpful is the commentary that Stacy was saying could be the next step. I actually think the staff, if there's like a executive summary of that commentary that we can see over time, that might be even more valuable than we talked about this the last 3 years. Why haven't we done anything? That like we've been seeing the same the same actions being taken that aren't kind of in line with what we're wanting to see. Should we be evaluating? So I think I totally agree with Don. I wouldn't stick just to the dashboard kind of data reporting. I think it would be also really valuable to have whatever we decide to do on the kind of commentary or staff overview.
Any other questions, comments? Overall, thank you for the effort. This is definitely a much more robust spreadsheet than what we saw last time. So I like the way it's going. You guys are seriously putting some thought into this, which is great.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep at it and just try to make it better, especially that final summary tab. It would be nice to be able to capture, you were saying, add the visual dashboard, add the executive summary, but also just like because we receive information as these sites are being monitored, and it would be nice to have like a place for you click on it, go to it, you can see what the report says, how the site is functioning, is it meeting performance standards, and then you would be able to see that and see what the information that comes into us. So I will keep working on that final summary tab. The information that's contained within the spreadsheet that's here now is going to remain there. It's just I'm going to try to add things to make it better.
Thank you.
Yep.
Quick question for
Yep.
the board. We've, in the fast track to schedule this discussion annually for about August. Does that seem right? I'm thinking maybe we could do a written update and then report back out on progress from the feedback tonight. And then do another presentation in person in August, or would the board like to see this topic come back?
I'm going to look to Doug for that. When's the best time for us to see this?
I mean, I can come back with the spreadsheet before August and kind of show what I've done with the final summary and see if it works for you. And if there's something else that you would want to see in it too, you can tell me at that point, and then I can come back with the version and then do the actual reporting in August.
Everybody?
I'll follow up with you.
Okay.
All right, Doug, you get to stay on stage for us and right into a riparian assessment report.
Okay. Didn't know if Doug, if you wanted to introduce this project or if you just want me to launch right into it.
Just launch right into it, Don.
Okay. Hi, nice to meet everybody virtually. I'm Dawn Spilsbury-Pucci. I work with Facet, and which used to be the watershed company when we first started this project with you all. And I will just pull up, I can share my screen, I'm assuming that's all right with you all. Let me dual screening here, so. And trying to get it to switch. There we go. So are you all seeing now the the right presentation?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks for your patience. So yeah, so the project that I'm here to talk about, maybe get some initial feedback, is called the city, what we're calling the City of Issaquah Riparian Assessment and Recommendations. And where this comes from is it's part 2 of the CAO update that was kind of hit a milestone in 2022. There was a best available science review and gaps analysis that was done, and some riparian buffer widths were adopted into code under the critical area ordinance. At the same time, there was some significant riparian ecosystem guidance coming out from DFW, and this is the name of their document. And I don't know if it's been a big topic of conversation here in Issaquah, but it has been in other places, and it revolves around their guidance has said a few things. The gist is that rather than assigning buffer widths on whether a stream is fish habitat or not, it says that they recommend that buffer widths be assigned based on the site class, based on which is related to the trees that grow on the riparian area. So how the buffer should be the width of a 200-year-old tree in that area. So that changes based on your soil classes, depends on what trees you grow and how big they can get within that 200 years. So hence, we have this variable buffer that they recommend. And that is in recognition that it's not just in-stream habitat that they're trying to protect. We're trying to protect the other riparian ecosystem elements, so amphibians and travel corridors and leaf litter, and it's not just the in-stream shade and complexity. So this is a little bit of a shift. It's considered best available science now, and so it kind of came out at the same time that the 2022 CAO were adopted. So I believe, and I wasn't here at the beginning of this project, but I believe the idea was to take a look at what those would look like, what we call the SPTH, so site potential tree height at 200 years, SPTH. What SPTH buffers would look like compared to what the new regulatory width buffers, the 150 or the 75 to 50 feet, depending on the stream type. And then recognizing that those areas might be different, in those areas where the SPTH would be wider than regulatory buffers, is there some kind of voluntary ecological lift that we could get by different strategies or different actions? And so also within the stream itself, so what kind of things can we do? Can we tailor to the stream in that particular part of the streams to get this ecological lift? So that's kind of the gist of this report. And I say report, I'll call it project probably, because it's not just, we don't want to just give you a big 90-page document, because those aren't very, very fun or useful, although some of the pictures are great. But so this project has a few different elements to it. So one is we looked at the comparison and we mapped out the comparison between what the regulatory buffer site potential tree height at 200 years looks like. So we have a GIS comparison of that, and I have a screenshot to show you in a minute. Then what would those areas of site potential tree height, we called them riparian benefit zones. Trying to get away from the word buffer because they are not regulatory at this point. So where are those on the landscape? So what kind of land use and elements and all that, what does it look like under that kind of overlay? And then what are the limiting factors in each of those reaches? And what can we suggest, or what can we do that might result in a lift? And so then we also included a large chunk of the report. We broke out some of the strategies that popped up into grouping. We grouped them and gave some descriptions and some photos and some some examples from around the country and some other places as well in Europe, some international ones, to kind of give some inspiration. And then also what could we be doing to look at funding these? So what are some of the funding strategies that could be incorporated or could be utilized? So actually, before I go on, does anybody have any questions about kind of the parts of this or the purpose or?
Yeah, we got a question for you, Dawn. Raj?
Yeah.
Hi, Dawn and Raj. So if you can elaborate a little bit on, what really why is it important, right? Why is this saving the riparian important and the benefits, the real benefits? And also you mentioned something about the 200-year, I'm guessing, trees, right? So why is that the magic number? I mean, this is just for my information.
I wish I could tell you that as to why that number was used. Let me go to the next slide, and it explains a little bit, gives us a little bit more visual on that site potential tree height. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife, there's a huge two-volume, what's the word I'm looking for, compendium on this site potential tree height concept. And I can't tell you off the top of my head where the 200-year comes from. Because DNR, forest practices, uses a different site potential tree height year value. So I'm not really sure. So I'd have to refer you back to that document as to why this 200 is what it is. The first volume is all about that science, and then how did they establish what that height actually is of a 200-year-old tree per soil type polygon, and it's also based on the slope of the land at that time as well, and they vary. These buffer widths vary, and so that's what this blue column is here there we go. This blue column right here, this is the range of buffer widths that are within Issaquah's creeks. And then the yellow is what your buffer widths are currently. So the biggest gap in where this new best available science exceeds what you're protecting at with your regulatory buffers are mostly in the type N streams up high. Luckily for you all, those are usually up in your protected areas or your conserved areas and your hills where there isn't a lot of development. So I don't know about the actual impact of that. We did not look at the type N's terribly close, like past this kind of comparison. And I'll get to that in a second, which ones are the focus creeks that we looked at. But and this is really typical. There's a lot of all the jurisdictions that Facet is working with right now with comprehensive plans and critical area ordinance updates are all struggling with this and trying to figure out how to meet the intention of BAS while also not resulting in a whole bunch of variances necessary in their, non-compliant lots and such forth. So the way that Issaquah is approaching it, the way you guys are approaching it, it's really unique and it's pretty darn cool if you ask me, in that you are looking for the voluntary reach beyond where your regulatory buffers are. You're recognizing the fact that the best available science is out there that says these areas are important and will be important, like looking 200 years into the future, and which extends past the life of a lot of the structures that are in these areas right now. So are there things that we can do now to kind of gear up and get these areas fully functioning sometime in the future? If not now, how far in the future? So I don't know if that answers your question fully, or if that helps, or if I just confuse things worse.
No, that helps. And so basically, but the riparian benefit zone is because of these areas have certain types of biodiversity or something, right? Isn't that why it's important? Is that why?
Yeah. Sorry.
Save it or conserve it?
Yes, exactly. Because they're centered around they're centered on the streams, but it's recognition that so historically we've operated under fish habitat. So in-stream habitat, we want to protect their complexity of their habitat in the stream, their pools and their hiding areas, their refugia. We want to protect the shade for the temperature of the water. And so we looked at just how the impact of the area along the stream banks was in service to the water itself. This new BAS is saying, well, no, we need to take a broader view. Yes, the fish in the in-stream are important, but there's a whole lot of everything, the whole lot of other pieces to the system that make it go and make it function. So we need the amphibian habitat, and that's up on the banks. So how do we protect the banks so that we're looking at the banks and these riparian areas as a critical habitat to be protected in and of themselves, rather than them just acting as the buffer for the habitat that we care about in the stream. So it's adding value or recognizing the value of these bank and upstream areas. Wildlife corridors, water filtration to filter out any chemicals of emergent concern or chemicals in general. CECs, the sediment we knew about before the sediment control, but so the bird species, the other things that use these areas, they're just as important as the fish, the salmon that live in this stream. So
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
A couple other questions for you, Dawn.
Yeah.
Alex actually was.
Oh, I'm sorry, Alex, you're.
Thank you. This is Alex Leaf-Tigner. I'm really excited that Issaquah is taking this approach and adopting these buffers. But I also just wanted, for clarity's sake, can you define type N, type F, and type S streams?
Yes, absolutely. Try to be brief on the slide, and that comes with the need for me to explain stuff. So thank you for pointing that out. I also want to point out that Issaquah is not necessarily adopting these buffers, not yet, or that this is just kind of a management concept at this point. So there's no code language or anything like that at this time that's going along with this. And then there's the water typing in the state of Washington right now used to be types 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with 1 being the big shorelines and 5 being the little tiny seasonal streams up top. In the upper watershed. So they've switched that. They switched that about, I don't know, I think it was about 15 years. Forest Practices led the way through the Forest and Fish Report way back in 2000. And they adopted this new system of stream typing. So type S and then shoreline are the big rivers and creeks and water bodies that are down low. They're connected to a marine environment. They're connected to, they have to have, they're connected. How is it? There's a designation, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it, a definition of what classifies a type S water. Know that they are managed under the Shoreline Management Act, under SMA, not the GMA. And in Issaquah, your two type S creeks, because of their water volume that they carry, are the Main Stem Issaquah and the East Fork Issaquah. So those are your 2 type S. They are managed under you have an SMP, Shoreline Master Program, for those streams. And they have their own sets of buffers. Then there's the type F for fish. And those are the creeks and streams and water bodies that have the potential for having fish habitat. So they don't actually have to have fish present. They are just fish habitat streams. So in theory, if you can fix all of the barriers, that their fish would be there if we weren't, messing stuff up for them. So those are type F. And then the type Ns are non-fish. And then that can actually be broken out into NP for non-fish perennial and NS for non-fish seasonal. But for this, we're just putting them as type N. So those are the upper, so they'll be like above a natural barrier or a steep slope or a waterfall. Not all the time, because you can have resident fish up in there, I guess. So type N anyway is non-fish habitat. And for this project, we were asked and we were scoped to look at the type F streams for the for the characterization and the looking for the net ecological lift in the strategies, we were looking at type F only, not the type S or the type N. We did look at the type S just briefly to see if anything was significantly different in their status or their characteristics based in comparing them to the parametrics report that was done in 2006. But yeah, so that's why we're looking at the type F streams only. And let's see, so this shows that this diagram down here, this graphic is from the GIS analysis. And so this just kind of shows you, this is Lewis Creek. And so this is I-90 below here. And then this is the very western boundary of the city limits. So Lewis Creek. So down lower in Lewis Creek, the buffer down here is 150 feet, the regulatory buffer, which is the yellow polygon. But the site potential tree height down in here for a 200-year-old tree is wider than 150. It's probably 205 or 220 or something. And so the RBZ is what we're calling it, extends past where the yellow is underneath it. So this would be, a newer area that's considered by best available science as important for riparian function, but isn't right now regulatorily protected. Conversely, if you go upstream a little bit, this is where the SPTH is lower than the buffers. That your regulatory buffers in Issaquah are actually fully protecting this area. So, and that is the case wherever there's a green line in this diagram over here. Wherever there's a green line, that creek is fully protected under your current regulatory standards. So, which is really great, actually. And these are your big fish streams as well, the big S streams. So that's kind of one of the interesting things about this site potential tree height work, and is that it resulted, because it's based on soil class and trees, tree heights after 200 years, you get the big tall trees, the firs and the cedars in the upper slopes. The lower areas, the floodplains, the channel migration zones with the cottonwoods and the alders, they don't tend to get as tall. So those tend to be narrower down there according to the site potential tree height. So it's kind of converse of the way we'd been managing them before. So that's something to wrestle with later with the SMP updates eventually down the road. So they'll straighten it out. There's still a lot of wrangling and interpretation happening at the state level, even between agencies, the state agencies, about how to implement and interpret and utilize this information. So ecology's wrangling with it a bit, obviously.
Thank you, Dawn. We had one other question for you from Jamie.
Okay.
Hi, Dawn. I have actually two questions for you. One, is the expectation at some point that jurisdictions will start, because I think there's a bunch of language in Title 18 about applying best available science to code. Yep. So is the reason we're not doing that now because there's not enough consensus on how to use this insight in code? Or I'm just curious how, and timelines on whether there's other jurisdictions that are starting to actually implement this, or if everyone's in the kind of feeling it out phase.
I can answer a little bit of that before you do, just at least from the local level.
Yeah.
So the riparian information from WDFW came out kind of at the 11th hour when we were going through Title 18 update. We weren't able to analyze that at that time to see what the impacts were. We were at that point already had the draft critical area code out there. It was going to be adopted, at least start going through the public process. So with this information now, this will be included with any future code updates with best available science to create new code amendments in the future. We have a SMP periodic update in 2029. So that may be the time we're going to be looking at Issaquah Creek and East Fork, Issaquah Creek, where we're gonna have to start using this best available science on those. Once this report comes out, that's gonna be a policy discussion for us, is what do we want to do with this information right now? Since we've already gone through our critical area update as part of Title 18, we aren't on the clock to get that done again until our next round, which I want to say is like early 2030s. And I'm not saying that that's where we're going to wait. We're going to sit on this until then, but that's when the requirement would be. But since we have to open things up in 2029, we'll start in 2027, that might be an opportunity then. It could be sooner. That's going to be a discussion, like once we have this information and see what the report says, how we can utilize it, what are our streams like now? What are their conditions? And so it could be sooner. So that's the timeline that we're working with right now, which isn't really answering the question on timeline. I'm just throwing like, but we are using this. We will be using this for best available science, and we'll probably have to seek more information from Facet 2 as we prepare any future code amendments.
Yeah, I was going to answer it, Doug, that the critical area ordinance was approved in 2022, and you're not required under this to incorporate in between updates. You're not required to incorporate BAS. So the fact that Issaquah is looking at this now as with voluntary measures, it's fantastic. So I think you're ahead of the game.
No, thank you.
Other-
I think that answers my question. I had another one.
Okay.
The term ecological lift has been used. And, just looking at what the words mean, I conceptually understand it, but I would love you to maybe give me as much context on that term as you can.
Yeah, sure. So as a practical example, how about this? And this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but if there's a house that's in if there's a yard or a house that now falls under this RBZ overlay that wouldn't have been there before, well, even if it wasn't, even if it's within the regulatory buffer, if they can incorporate some kind of LID when they come for, like if they want to put on a deck or if they want to put on a new garage, but they find that their property is now within this, either the regulatory buffer or the RBZ, is there some way that they can mitigate that? Can we ask that they put impervious pavers on their driveway? Can we encourage them to replace their ornamental plantings with native trees that will then eventually grow up and be big trees? And can we do some kind of education with them? Can we do some kind of cool invasive species control within the community that they're not required to do right now? We're improving the system, we're improving the ecology over the current standard. So it's like a net ecological gain, but that term comes with so much baggage that we're trying to avoid it because it kind of muddies the water a little bit. There might be ways that, and actually you'll see this coming up, stormwater is a big part of the potential improvements for Issaquah. So where can we encourage different stormwater mitigation strategies? And it might be with the city itself. It might be working with neighboring jurisdictions. It might be incorporating or bringing businesses into the fold and having them step up and do something differently with their properties. So it's where can we tweak things with a voluntary effort to better the ecology and better the functions and the processes.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. If my mouse would work. Let's see if I can advance the slide that way. Yes. All right. So what we did is we broke all of the type F creeks. We broke them into reaches. And then we looked at and those are based on like a break in land cover or land use type or a major crossing. So Lewis Creek, as an example, is one reach here breaks under the highway, that's reach 2. And then as Lewis Creek comes back in through the city jurisdiction up here, that's reach 3. And then we did that for Schneider and Tibbetts and Laughing Jacobs and Park Hill and Muirwood and Many Springs, and I think that's everybody. And North Fork, Issaquah. Those are our focus creeks, but that's the next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself. Each of the reaches we looked at, we defined the characteristics that you're seeing in this table here, and the sources that we used are the GIS. It was mostly a GIS analysis using layers available to us. We looked at what is the percent of the, what's the land cover by type, what percent of the RBZ in that reach is mixed use, how much is commercial, how much is conservation. There we go. What is the percent that's in impervious surfaces? How many wetlands? How much, or the proportion of wetlands? What does the slope look like? What's the average width of the buffer that is there now, if there is a buffer? And then we did a heavy cruise through the Storm and Surface Water Manual, the master plan that was approved in 2022, which was a fantastic document, by the way. And so we looked to see what they noted as issues and problems. And then we went and we visited all of these and got some photos, not great photos because it was really dark and stormy, but we got photos and we were able to kind of look and determine what the channel characteristics were kind of like in the invasive species. So this was the field visit light. We weren't too aggressive with the field visits. And so then so each reach, each stream in the report has a table that documents these. It's summarized, but then in the appendix, it's all numbered out as well. There's an appendix with a big spreadsheet that has all of this in it. So the focus creeks that we looked at again are these ones. So, and then these are roughly the reaches that are broken out that you're looking at. Obviously Tibbetts had the most, it's got the most length. It's just the longest one. The Park Hill and Southeast 50th, I don't know that that's actually the name of this creek, so I'll just point that out. That's just what we called it for the report. So it's the one that goes into Park Hill up here. So an example of what that looks like, and we're going to follow this section of North Fork through the next. So this is the characterization. So North Fork, Issaquah 1 and FI1, which is this reach here, north. And we're able to, we summarized the issues noted that we found and what the in-stream water conditions were, kind of what the invasive species situation was. This is a sample of what the chart looks like because it's quite long and numbery. And then we brainstormed after we did the characterization. We looked at there was several of us from across our what's the word I'm looking for, disciplines in Facet. We got together and we went reach by reach. So we had a landscape architect with us. We had a stormwater management student who's also a landscape architect and an arborist. She was with us looking at it. We had a planner looking, and we had myself as an ecologist and another ecologist and GIS analyst. And we all just sat down and just brainstormed what we knew from our different disciplines, what might be helpful. And we'll go into the restoration side of things next. But so that's kind of, so for example, North Fork Issaquah 2, which is the stretch that comes down through here, through the big wetland complex. Actually, it's just south of the wetland complex that's up here by that major restoration that was done just recently. So we noted that there's a flow control facility on it. It's listed as an impaired water body for dissolved oxygen, temperature, and bacteria. It's got a lot of blackberries, reed canary grass, so a lot of invasive species happening there. There's a devoid in the channel, devoid of structure. It's got some, oh, down here on this end though, the barriers have been starting to be replaced. The work is being done on it. The current condition though, it's mostly around the water quality side of things with some invasive species. So that's the characterization, and we did that for all of the reaches. And then, oh, this is the other part of that chart. When I said it was long, I guess I forgot that I stuck the other part of it in here. So again, back to North Fork 2. So the land cover is not so bad. 1.9% bare soil, 21% grass, 39% coverage. Anyway, you get the idea. This is mixed use, and CF is commercial. Forgive me, I forgot the acronyms off the top of my head. I haven't been in the land use designation side of this project in about 6 months. 21% of the RBZ is impervious cover, impervious surface. There's some wetlands in there by type. There's some type 2 and type 3 wetlands, and the slope. And the existing width of the riparian zone that's just an averaged guess based on the GIS. So it's 25 feet in, on the side that it's facing the roads and the buildings, but on the west side where it has a lot of area to spread out towards the main stem, it's got quite a lot of buffer. So it's over 250 feet there. So that's.
We have about 10 minutes left.
Okay, well, it's fine. We're just about done. So after we looked at that, the restoration, let's go. Trying to advance the slide, and there we go. So this is back to the restoration ideas, and it's not just restoration. There's some protection and some different management things, and we grouped them into the riparian vegetation group, a water quality, water quantity group, riparian in-stream structure group. Some of them are really easy. Some of the ideas we came up with are really easy. Some of them are big and wild and aspirational, just to kind of give a full range. And I'm sure that there would be other ideas that people could come up with as well. So this is just meant as a starting point for conversation. So back to our North Fork Issaquah. So the restoration, what we could be looking at there would be to the stormwater management. So working with the commercial areas there. Do we have stormwater retention already? Probably. Can we put some treatment on it? And can we think of some charcoal sand filters and get rid of, to kind of filter out some of the 6 ppd quinone? That might be an issue there. Where else? So we're looking at the invasive species removal. Can we get to that in some kind of established management plan for it? Can we work with some of the nonprofits and the volunteer groups that are already doing that in the area? Native species planting, make some use of some of the funding that's available, the mitigation or in lieu funding, and get some plants in there. So some crazy ideas, some other crazier ideas are, could we look at, well, we'll go to actually, I'll hold on to that for a second because, yeah, it's just a summary of what we were just talking about. Industrial materials disposal, floodplain reconnection. So invasive species removal, fairly doable. Looking at floodplain reconnection, actually, you guys are doing a really great job in Issaquah with that kind of work already. So what kind of funding, though, comes into it? This is the part of the report that I feel is the weakest part right now. As I was digging into this, Issaquah already does a great job with a lot of work and strategies, and the capital improvement plan is great and points to a lot of these things that is being done already. So it was, I'll be honest, it was a little bit of a struggle to kind of think of something that you all aren't already doing. I think to get to it, I think having a task force, maybe like getting a subgroup together, maybe it's this group, I don't know, but to kind of look through these things, and somebody that knows Issaquah intimately, and the work that you're already doing with your nonprofits, and figure out what could be done with the resources you already have. There's a lot of grants out there right now, as you're all aware, for funding this kind of work, infrastructure grants and stuff. So having a grant writer on staff, even if it's a part of their job, maybe the other part is managing these projects, something like that, that would be really helpful. We found the communities that we hear that they want a person to do this, or the nonprofits need a person to help them write grants and manage these projects. So something like that might be an idea. So the report does have a bunch of places to look for grants, a list of the current grants, but we wanted to kind of keep it a little bit timeless. So the grants shift and change. The incentives, there were some kind of crazy ideas in there as well. And then the impact fees, you're already collecting impact fees. So maybe using some of those, steering them to this work. So here's some ideas that we just kind of threw out there. So back to the North Fork Issaquah example, the stormwater management, there's a grant out there right now, piloting solutions for contaminants. It's due quickly, coming up. Maybe there's a project in there that can be funded with that. If we'd had something that's off the shelf, maybe one of the SIP projects, perhaps, I don't know. Green roofs, if we can encourage some green roofs in some of the buildings right along North Fork Issaquah, that'll help. Invasive species removal, we talked a little bit about that. You helping with the INLU and the mitigation funds that are collected for planting the natives. Working with the auto body and marine and glass. This area in here, these businesses in here, because the creek goes through here, as you probably know. So working with these businesses here to see if they have industrial disposal facilities already, what are they doing, and do they need help? And maybe if they would commit to something, we can reduce their stormwater fees, or they get star ratings, like the food quality, stars on the restaurants. Floodplain reconnection, there's some grants that are coming out that would help with that. And I would encourage, whenever you're doing anything fishy related, staying in contact with the lead entity and the local integrating organization. They've got their hands on a lot of coordination for grants. So that's just a real fast snippet of some of the ideas that we were thinking about and what this report can do. Sorry, my mouse is being grumpy. There we go. So this is my last slide. So where we are right now, it's about 85% complete, the report. There's some tidying up of things to do. If you have ideas or missing any parts, can identify any missing parts or things you want us to dig into, we can add those. I want to talk to Dan Hintz as well. Thank you, Stacy, for that recommendation, to kind of vet this with him, since he's got the urban tree handle. So I want to talk with him about stuff about this report. And then, kind of go through this SIP a little bit and figure out what kind of fits really well right now or in early, and maybe there's some low-hanging fruit as far as current grants that are available. And then I'd like to put it with a web interface, some kind of web map, so that it's not just this 90-page document we're handing you all. It's got a web interface. You can go and click on the reach, and it pulls up the information we're telling you, that we're just talked about. I don't know about connecting it to grants, because those shift and change, and those so it would make it outdated, but somehow make it a little bit more user friendly, so we're not just handing you a 90-page document. And that's and the timeline is, I believe we have to have this done by December. So that's what I have to share with you tonight. So
Okay, thank you, Dawn. We got a few minutes for questions. Jamie, I saw you had yours up and then.
Oh, yeah, I had just forgotten to take it down.
Okay, sorry about that. Are we gonna get to see this report when it's complete? Can we?
Yeah.
I will share it with you.
Good.
Yep. Yeah, and also we didn't have this presentation, Dawn, if you could share it, I'll make sure the board has it, either attach it to this packet if I can, retroactively, or make sure it's included with our notes in the next packet.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, and I did the briefing paper, but I didn't send the presentation along. Sorry about that, Stacy. Yeah.
This is exciting. It's great to see that Issaquah is taking a leap and moving this forward when it's not yet required, but, you know, kind of speaking to what was talked about earlier, I do see as regulations tighten down, this will probably be the future of how to manage riparian areas. Jonathan?
Just a thought about these riparian areas that's not covered here. There's probably certain areas that are much more prone to pollution than others. And if a report like this could, if you're doing a survey of an area, if you could highlight those areas and there could be community efforts to clean those areas up. You know, certain areas I've noticed through some of this litter cleanup are, you know, there's places where the creeks get polluted. And, you know, if the city knew where those were, we could target those areas for cleaning. Just a thought.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to move us along then because we're right on time here. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I'll send out the presentation. If folks have feedback, looking back through the presentation, 2 pages that is attached, please go ahead and send it. Otherwise, we'll plan to share the final.
Yeah, so once I get it, I'll send it to you.
You want to move right into your topic, Stacy, or do you want to break?
No. Okay, thanks so much, Don. I put together a couple brief slides because it's not the most exciting topic. So we're going to talk next about our annual report and self-analysis. I'll give a little bit of background around the requirements, especially for the new board members, refresher for the existing board members. Talk about, wanted to have a conversation with you all about any improvements that you want to make for this next year. And I can pull up those Word documents to capture any notes. This is about a month earlier than we normally talk about this topic. That was based on feedback from the board retreat back in January, that we wanted to touch on this a little bit earlier so the board had a chance to shape and influence what will be reported back to council. So just as a reminder, for those especially new to the board, we are required to provide an annual report to the mayor, city council. It's due by the end of December. Within that report, we're also required to provide a self-analysis, which we've typically done through a survey. The report outline goes through each of the steps in the Issaquah Municipal Code that are called out as responsibilities of the board. Template was developed the first year the board was formed. We've basically used that same template since then. For consistency's sake, we'd like to use at least the same, the major components of that template as we continue to report to council. However, especially after feedback from the board retreat and just as board members turn on the board and new board members come in, we want to allow the opportunity to add information or make minor revisions if there's interest. And then for the self-analysis, again, this is a requirement that we include to the council. We've typically included that within the board report. We provide a summary, but then all of the details. Again, we've been working on a template that was developed in 2021 for the questions that we asked the board to respond to. We've made some minor refinements and improvements to that over the years. Again, we recommend for the most part for keeping that consistent. That'll allow us to look at changes over time in the board and how we're making improvements on things that maybe didn't score so well in the past. but definitely open to any revisions that would just help improve the clarity of the question, or if there's any questions that we want to ask this year. So we'll go into a bit more detail on those in a minute for feedback, but just in terms of our process, looking for input tonight or over the next couple of weeks in writing, or I should say over the next week or so, because we are hoping to distribute the self-analysis within the next 2 weeks, so we can have those results to report back on in November. Also, just a reminder, we're going to ask board members, please do take the self-analysis. I think we had 8 out of 12 took it last year, so really encourage you all to take it. It will be pretty quick, but it's really important to provide feedback to staff and also for council to understand how you all are feeling about your role on the board.
Just one question, when you say self-analysis, you mean as a board, right? Accumulative.
Yes. Yes.
Just
Yeah.
making sure. Okay.
Yeah, we do have usually we present a summary of the self-analysis. You all will get to see all the results. It's done anonymously, so feel free to.
Sending Prash, report on
Right.
Prash.
Gosh, that's a like,
I did not care, but yeah, I just sort of.
it's not us. We try to roll up the results. So that is going to come out earlier this year at the request of the board back in January, so we can look at the results in November and kind of make any final, have a conversation around it and a little bit more time for review before the reports distributed to council. We are also planning to provide a full draft report to the board at the November meeting, so we have a little bit more time to finalize that before approval in December. We will then transmit the report to council by then. So tonight, just wanted to talk a little bit about the board report and any additional content you'd like. One thing that was flagged at the January retreat of the board was a bit more of an outlook of where we think we're going and what we want to tackle going forward. So wanted to see if that's of interest still to include. And then if there's any additional sections that you all want to include, things that you feel like the report doesn't currently capture about our work. Definitely want that feedback. And then similar for the self-analysis, any revisions we can do to the questions, make to the questions in order to improve clarity. Are there any new questions that you all want to make sure that we can get board feedback on and reflect the work that you're doing?
Stacey, we have a question from Tom.
That's it. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yes, thank you. I think the principle of 360 review is good and valuable. I guess I'm curious. I'd like to hear what the council thinks about how the board is doing and how our feedback is working or not working for them. Is that possible that we can get that kind of feedback towards us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Last year, we had the opportunity for Jamie and Dawn presented to the council on the board, both on the work we've been doing, but then also a bit about our report and the self-analysis. I think that was very well taken from the council, and they expressed their appreciation for all that the board has done. We have also been talking as the staff liaisons to have council come back out to the boards and speak to us. So have almost like a liaison to the council and come and meet with us and reflect back out. So I can request either, if there's any feedback council wants to provide to the board, and also see if we might be able to have a member of council come out and meet with us and provide some of that input in person. That's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
There's another format you would like feedback or any other ideas?
Jamie?
Yeah, I think also going, and this is, Stacey, you kind of alluded to this, but I know if Nancy was here, she would be suggesting that budget priorities and things that we like for the forward looking that one, we should be doing that, and that should be a core part of the report. And then figuring out ways to ensure that, I mean, a couple of things come to mind are climate investments. It's not quite here yet, but there's going to be investments needed on Dan's urban forest management plan. So, and I think Stacy, one thing that would be great to hear from you on is just is this the right place to use our voice to help put some weight and make sure that council, I mean, is hearing that we care about those things and what's the right way to do that? That's something I know we talked about a lot earlier this year during that retreat, but I think that's not currently captured in the report as it is. And then what was the other thing I was thinking? Yeah, I don't know. One of the things that I continue to struggle with, and I know this has come up before, is there is no single person that owns environmental topics at the city. And so part of the reason that I was talking about a scorecard and like the fact that the natural environments checklist just isn't that, it's a document tracking planning. I just worry that like we have a clear scorecard for climate action, that is the climate action plan. There's not really the same thing for the natural environment. And so I think it's beyond the scope of what we're likely to accomplish this year, but that was originally, I think, the intent at the retreat was to talk through how could we make either that checklist or our annual report something that would maybe be that organizing force. So Dan and Stacy and Doug, all the different teams that touch the environment are coming together and helping us put together a summary that gives a view, and not just for us, but hopefully for the public as well, into like how did the natural environment fare in Issaquah. So that's a big thing, but that was, I think, along the lines of what we were talking about. And we both through the checklist and through this report haven't quite accomplished.
What, to put that into kind of something that might be captured by the report, could we have almost, like I was wording it here, it's like a gaps or concerns section. Like here are things the board has identified that they see as major issues in the environmental realm of the city. And then we could speak, I might look to you all to help draft some of that language, but we should speak to some of those specific things that have come up this year.
And you could also roll investments into gaps and concerns as well.
Yeah.
You see. Dom, did you have another comment, or is your hand just still up from earlier?
Sorry, it was just dangling. I pulled it down. Thanks.
No problem, Dom. Thank you. One thing that I remember too from our meeting was getting feedback from council on their priorities going forward, rather than us developing on our own.
Plus one, that was actually the other thing I was trying to think of, because there's an environmental subcommittee, right? Or
There is a, yes.
it's not just environment. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and that's kind of this number 8, carry out other duties as prescribed. Those haven't necessarily been, and I think we basically had nothing to report the last couple of years there, but. Great.
Other than that, I thought it was pretty comprehensive.
Okay, great. Yeah, and for the new folks, this is attached in the packet. It really follows kind of the city code that developed the board and the different things that it calls us as responsible for. And we've basically just summarized within that. The other thing we attach here is all of the letters we've written, especially this year. You all reviewed 3 massive plans, and so we'll speak quite a bit to that and attach those letters here. One thing that just made me think, especially about earlier, some email exchange today was, I'll make sure we capture here something about the school district. And maybe that's part of the gaps too. Anything, if anyone had a chance to flip through the draft and had other feedback?
Roger?
So Stacey, I had a couple of suggestions. I really like the idea what Tom said, get the feedback from council actually, and either through you or through them, we actually know how the, our input affected.
Yeah.
So I was looking to see if we can get some specifics. I know recently, I don't remember which one, but we talked about some tax increase for Issaquah citizens. I think some 6% or 10%, and we went over that back and forth, and then we gave a recommendation. So I wanted to see, what happened with it, or some real life examples of making how our input matters. That would be good to know. And I don't remember, but I don't think the self-analysis had a comment section, just a comment section, not a question. Because sometimes it's not a question, but it's generally the tone or, there could be means people might have some comments on it, general comments on it. It may not necessarily be framed in a question. So I would like to see that.
Okay.
On our self-analysis.
Yeah.
Yes. it's those.
Oh, yeah, open comment.
I'll make sure there's a
Yeah,
general
it's
one.
there.
I can pull that up
Sorry.
meetings next too. Great. Do we want to move over the self-analysis or any other?
Yeah, did you
thoughts?
get what you need on this?
I had one
Yeah.
one more quick thing. I do think the way we get council feedback is really important, because if we say, hey, council, send us something that tells us how we're doing, it's gonna be, oh, you guys are great, like, yeah, everything's great. So I think an informal setting that isn't like recorded, basically, like if we could have a way that we're just kind of having a conversation with them versus it's like at a meeting, that to me feels much more valuable. And then one question for you, Stacey, is does council see our work plan in advance of the year?
Not in advance of the year. We just discussed that as staff and they will be receiving a packet of work plans probably in the March, April timeframe. So after we've approved it here.
So yeah, if we know that going into next year, it might be nice to put it into our council reports briefly,
Yeah.
very briefly. Especially if we're going to go in front of them again.
Great. And our thought is to bring that work plan to you all. I think November we'll have a preview of it and then December. So we could work towards approving it in December and include it.
Alex had a comment. Alex?
Yeah, thank you. In kind of the same realm of getting feedback from everyone else, is there an opportunity for staff, Stacey and David, to give us feedback as a board as well on this process and how you think we're doing? I think that would be helpful as well, since you're the ones that interact with us the most as well.
Yeah, we could think about what format that looks like. But yeah, maybe if we have an informal session with council.
Even beyond you and David, all of the folks that come and talk with us.
Yeah, I mean, just quick response to that. I know the staff really appreciate coming here and really take the comments to heart and work to incorporate where they can, so. Other thoughts around the report? Anything that you all feel like is missing, you want to make sure is reported on to council? These are great additions. So we'll move over to the self-analysis, but in terms of the report, we'll work on drafting that up over the next month and plan to present you all with a draft at the November meeting and then move to approve it in December. It probably will not include a full analysis of the survey. We'll see how far we can get depending on responses. So wanted then to just see if there's any proposed revisions to language in the self-analysis and if there are any questions you all want to make sure are added to that. We'll make sure there's just an open response at the end for any general comments.
Maybe one question on the process of the meetings.
Yeah. Okay.
In here, how does everybody feel the meetings are being run? How they, just kind of the tone. Are we doing what we think we're doing? Are we taking too long on things? Not spending enough time?
Yeah, I can walk through it real quick for folks this is new to. We kind of just want some general ratings on how well you think we're doing what we were assigned to do, overall satisfaction. We do look for some feedback on priorities for the next year. Of course, those will be balanced by the needs of the city administration. Staff support, looking for feedback there. Do you all feel like you're listened to and that your feedback's being taken into account? And that can be both at the staff, department, and council level. and then overall experience and any ideas for improvement, and then we'll add in additional ones. Any other feedback? Great. If you all do think of anything else you want included, definitely let me know in the next few days, Alex.
Yeah, sorry. When you send this out, can you send a review of what we said in the board report last year and then the report from last year that went to council as well?
Yes, we'll do that. Great. We are going to be working to put the self-analysis into a survey format over the next week to 10 days, and then we'll get that out to the board. If possible, we're looking for feedback by November 3rd, and that's so we can provide you with some of the preliminary results at our November meeting. If we're still waiting for a lot of comments, it might be very preliminary data. Our goal is to get 100% participation. Great, thanks for the feedback. That's it on that topic.
You have like 15 reports for us.
Yep. So I was gonna go through, we had a lot of written reports. There's a lot going on. So I did want to just highlight briefly, kind of give you the 1 to 2 sentence summary of each. And then I'll look to Karen and Mina if they have any updates. I have a few other updates on strategic plan, some upcoming meetings, things like that. And then I know a couple board members have some other announcements too. So bear with us. We'll still try and wrap up a little early. So written updates, there is a sustainable building and infrastructure policy update. This is around a policy that would be internal around city redevelopment or development of buildings as well as infrastructure. So thinking about playgrounds or stormwater systems. The document talks mostly about our process. We are working with a consultant, and right now we're still in the research phase. They will be starting some internal interviews in the next month or so, and then putting to some recommendations together for us to consider for policy development. This is one piece of the puzzle. This is about internal projects. We also have in Title 18 requirements for buildings over 10,000 square feet to be LEED Platinum certified. That's another piece of the policy or of the puzzle. And then there's also state energy efficiency and building codes, which is a third piece. Had some email exchange with Jamie that we want you all to understand how all those pieces work together and use that information to think about how we might make improvements to Title 18 in the future. It was always envisioned that we'd revisit the sustainable building requirements in Title 18. And we hope that that could be informed by having a better understanding of all those pieces and how they might work together. So we're looking at possibly February where we could talk about all three of those and then think about kind of future code recommendations. So just wanted folks to understand that kind of bigger picture as they're looking at that memo about the internal. There is a report on a feasibility assessment that we just completed with a consultant, Cezanne. We had a grant for them to do solar assessments across multiple community buildings, including a couple of city facilities. They've provided some reports that puts us in a really great position to apply for funding. And in fact, we've used some of those designs to apply for grants for our senior center at the Green Barn. Blakely Hall is using the design to try and move forward with funding there. And then we had a few other community buildings that were assessed in that project that we hope puts them in a good position to grant funding. Electric vehicle infrastructure, there's an update that focuses on our fleet charging and all the different pieces in play there. We have an update on a couple of projects we're working on in partnership with Puget Sound Energy, including the community solar project at the community center and our electric vehicle full charging program.
Quick question about Could you explain what, I think there's some grant funding and it was resulting in something happening. Could you quickly explain the like, there was something about the rates being low. I didn't understand the like, that part of it
Community.
for the
Yeah.
community solar.
Community solar. So the community solar project is not to generate power for the community center. It is project that will be, or all the energy generated will be subscribed to by community members. Typically, those are sold kind of at a premium. That's what happened with the Pine Lake Middle School Community Solar Project. PSC secured a grant that allows them to offer all of those subscriptions to households with low income at no cost. Plus, those individuals will receive a solar credit on their accounts. So they'll receive a $10 to $20 savings each month. So it will be opened up first to Issaquah residents and then probably to a little bit broader school district or something like that, residents that meet that income threshold. That help?
Yeah, thank you.
Two more written reports. Just an update on a program, new program that's in development around electrification incentives. As you all know, we have our Energy Smart Eastside heat pump program. It's always been envisioned that that would go beyond heat pumps. We have funding from the state to both work on program development and then to offer incentives for electric appliances and equipment. We are in the process right now of getting community engagement in terms of what that program should look like. What kinds of incentives are folks interested in? How do they want to receive an incentive? What kind of appliances are they interested in? We have a survey out. If you haven't seen it, I can make sure you receive it. We'll be doing focus groups in November and then starting to work on actually developing the program guidance. Our incentive funds have to be spent by June. So it will be a very quick pilot, but we're hoping it will help inform a more expansive regional electrification program that will be built into our Energy Smart Eastside partnership in the future. And then our Public Works team provided an update on our stormwater permit and the new permit that was issued to this. And I don't know much about that, so I'll leave it there. There is a memo. If you have questions, definitely let me know. I'll reach out to Mike and the Public Works team.
I'll comment.
Yeah, any questions? Yeah, comments on the reports, or Don can probably speak to
So
the.
read the memo on this one. There's a couple of key things that are going to cost the city a lot of money in here. So stormwater management for existing development. So retrofit clause by Ecology. It speaks to your pollution prevention comment earlier, John, of how do we retrofit our roadways to provide treatment to get pollutants from our roadways treated before they go into our streams. It's a good thing. It is going to be somewhat costly to cities. And then there's just a couple of lifts in there for staff time around mapping and changing how they manage a few programs. So please read through that.
Any questions on the other report? I'm going to read as you have time.
So understand the desire to expand beyond heat pumps with Energy Smart Eastside. Has there been any consideration for what an expanded, like the heat pump campaign would look like expanded? Or the main thing I'm thinking about is the fact that it's only Mitsubishi dealers that are able to do it. Like that cuts out a huge portion of people that install heat pumps. And so I would be interested in whatever we're looking at for the next stage in Energy Smart Eastside to do what is the incentive to reduce carbon reduction? Because I think it's going to be, heat pump water heaters, that could be a really obvious one, but I think almost nothing else will beat heat pumps for that. So I just hope that that's factored into how we decide to use the funds, because I think otherwise things are going to be really struggle to get anywhere close to what space heating and water heating.
Yeah, great question, and very timely. The reason we were set up with Mitsubishi to start was the ability for us to contract with a single distributor and get some rebates. We are now looking at putting out a RFP, a request for proposals, to multiple manufacturers of heat pumps, and also narrowing down our installers list. because we still have a lot of challenges with installer education and incorrect information being passed on to homeowners. But yes, our next big thing is to go beyond Mitsubishi and make sure the program's opened up to other manufacturers. So Sarah, who I think came after the new, maybe it was April, so right before some of the new board members started. She's our program manager for Energy Smart Eastside, sits at the city of Bellevue. She's preparing that RFP to go soon. So yeah, it's been a big barrier. It's taken us a while to get to this point. So it's something too that we'll consider very strongly as we're looking at other electrification incentives and make sure we're partnering with vendors or offering rebates from multiple manufacturers. Great. Yeah, any questions on any of the reports, please reach out. I have a bunch of other updates. Before I keep talking though, do you want to see if we have youth reports or other updates, and folks can take a break from my voice for a minute?
The only thing I know is that the sustainability policy that they're bringing to the school board is having their first reading tomorrow, the first edition. And so that's going to be presented, and they love public comment and support.
Thank you. I'll look that information up and send it out to the board. I'd like to report. Great. Should I keep going? Okay. Let's see. Great. Other school district updates. There was a question about the bond measures or the school district bond, and just wanted to let folks know that there are costs for clean buildings compliance included within that bond. There was a public hearing with the city council back in August. City council voted to express their support for the bond initiative. The presentation does not speak much to energy efficiency. They really focus on the new high school, but did want to pass that information along. Email exchange about that earlier today. Thank you for the update on the students. I did see an initial draft of the policy. It is very high level. And my understanding is the intent is it will request the superintendent to assign staff to the different areas of sustainability to develop action plans and goals. But it does touch on every sustainability area. So we'll try and get some information about the reading tomorrow and send that out to the board if it's interested.
Yeah, Nina, a question for you on that. So this is this going to be direction for the students only to work on sustainability, or is it going to be for the students to work in cooperation with the city?
Yeah, it's mostly for the city and the school district, actually. It's just developed by students for like purposes of like student input and things like that. But
I have a little bit of updates mixed with council updates in here, but just an update on the timeline of the budget. Transmittal of the full budget is going to council on the 28th of October. There will be several public hearings over the next month and a half with approval before the end of the year. Council on Monday voted to support, voted in favor of opposing initiative 2117. If initiative 2117 is passed, that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act. There was a public hearing on Monday. I'm happy to send that on to anyone that's interested. And Newcomb spoke as a community member at that public hearing. The urban forest management plan council review was pushed back a bit, but that will go to council committee later this month. And then it is slated for council approval before the end of November. Once I have dates on that, I can send that out to the board. Let's see, this Alex may know more about this, but did want to flag October 17th at 4 p.m. There's a kokanee fry release celebration at Lake Sammamish State Park. And then I have a less exciting update there is on the strategic plan. As you all know, many of you, thank you for participating on September 19th in the discussion. on the strategic plan. It will not be formally coming back to the board for review. But I will receive an updated version later this month. I will send it out to you all. If you have feedback, you can reach out to me directly and provide that input. And then just real quick on upcoming topics for the end of the year, bit of housekeeping, kind of end of year wrap up with the board report, self-analysis. We plan to bring you our 2025 work plan, or at least key topics we'll be working on for the ICAP. We'll bring to you all a proposed 2025 environmental board work plan. Sam Tarvin, our solid waste analyst, will come and present the work she is planning to do in 2025, and then we'll report out on any updates on the budget and impacts to our program. Any question on those items?
No, that's a lot.
Okay, great. I think Alex maybe had one announcement too.
Yeah, since you mentioned it, I'll speak to two things. The kokanee fry release is at 4:30 at the Lake Sammamish State Park boat launch on October 17th. And someone from City Council will be speaking. I don't know exactly who it is off the top of my head, but there will be representatives from the throughout the Lake Sammamish watershed talking about the kokanee recovery efforts. And the tribe, the Snoqualmie tribe, will be there to do a blessing of the fish before then launching their canoe and taking the fish out into the middle of the lake and releasing them. So this is kind of a celebration for those that are involved in kokanee recovery efforts, but also it's a public event. So there will be tabling, and folks are welcome to come out and see the fish a little bit and kind of get to experience that. And then Saturday, October 19th is Green Issaquah Day. And so I'm going to be leading a volunteer event, and I believe Jamie is also leading a volunteer event that day. I'll be at the Anthology Open Space, which is over by the Anthology Apartments, leading our first planting event at that site in partnership with Green Issaquah. And there's also an Issaquah Alps Trail Club led event. Yes. Yeah, so there's 3 opportunities to get out that day and volunteer for Green Issaquah and get some plants in the ground. So folks should join us out there. I think Stacy might have a flyer that I sent over with a QR code that you can use to sign up.
Yep, those are by the door, and I'll send out a link to each of these events as well as John some information.
Thank you.
This evening.
Anything, anybody else for the good of the group?
The question, you talked a bit about the meeting Monday with City Council on I-2117. And you stated the city's gonna support opposing that. What would be the impact to your organization if that were to, the funding for, say, the sustainability staff in Issaquah, if that were to fail?
Yeah,
If it were to pass.
if initiative 2117 passes, nothing particularly to city staff. What the Climate Commitment Act does provide for city benefit and community benefit is a number of grant programs. So we have over $1 million in secured grants that were funded through CCA. And then we had about 3.5 million in pending funding. That's now, we've heard back from a couple of those grants that were unsuccessful. We have about 2.5 million pending in funding through Climate Commitment Act that may or may not go through if that is repealed. There's also a number of community benefit programs, such as some of the electrification incentives. There was a utility rebate and electric vehicle, additional electric vehicle rebates that was partially funded through CCA. So there's some impacts in terms of our overall initiatives. A lot of the grant funding we would anticipate pursuing through CCA or large projects like solar installations, major energy efficiency projects that we probably can't fund with our city budget. So that's the information that we can share.
I read through that Washington State description a couple times, and I was trying to understand it, and it was pretty hard to
A
understand.
bit confusing, but they were.
What is, how is that, how is the average citizen impacted by that? How are they taxed? Is it through a gasoline tax primarily? And then is there a tax to say on natural gas and things like
I
that?
think there's a partial tax associated with it as well, but I think the main hit that everybody sees day to day is the rise in gasoline, even though they don't come right out and state it.
Okay,
For the
yeah,
CC.
I thought that's where it was, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's, the funding is coming through cap and trade program, so the top polluters have to basically purchase their credits for polluting. And that's where a lot of the revenue for the Climate Commitment Act is generated. It established the cap and trade for the carbon tax program. And it's generated a couple $2 billion, I think, in just the first few sales. But it's primarily a tax on the biggest polluters. So, and they're in the process, Ecology's in the process of looking at connecting the state program with some of the other cap and trade programs around the US and Canada that they think would probably bring down. So there's rulemaking process.
All right, no other questions, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, virtual folks, for joining us tonight.
Thank
Thank
you. Good
you.
night.
Okay, I'll 7 to